What am I supposed to do with my Monday nights from now on, Father?
So can you hear me online now, Diane? Diane, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I forgot to send the link out. You can see that nobody's showing up online. Oh, there's Jenna. At least you showed up, Jenna. Jenna, did you just get out of your exercise routine? You got it. You're muted. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I did, yeah. I was at the gym, and then I looked up the time, and I was like, well, I could make it in person, but then I'll be sweaty and gross. And I'm like, well, if I just run back to my apartment, hop in the shower, I can make it online. And I was like, shower, I kind of prioritize more than in person.
Got it. All right. Well, you're here. All right. People will start getting on if they can remember to look at their last link. Okay, so let's start with a little prayer. This is it. This is great. We're going to get right to the end. You'll love the ending. All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we ask you to send your blessing upon all of us gathered here today. May the things that we have done these past days to study about you and your laws and your teachings help us grow closer to you. May the good things we do in here help us see you one day in heaven. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. So you notice we are at the 8th commandment. I want to finish that up, but there's a few things I wanted to repeat because I rushed through them. And then there's the 9th commandment and the 10th commandment. All right, the 9th commandment being thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or the other neighbor's goods. All right. So I want to start on 2475, which I think some of you are familiar with already because we talked about it. That as Catholic, as Christians, we are to put away all falsehood, all malice, the desire to do evil, and all guile, side of that sly, cunning kind of activity that I hear people say all the time. I've said it myself, so I blame myself. Well, technically it's not, I wasn't lying, or technically I didn't say it wrong. We do that game all the time where we communicate, but we communicate by being sly and cunning, insincere. And we also, under this, is any kind of envy or slander that we talk about other people. So very few people confess to sin. And then yet we see it all the time. So anything, lying, this is offenses against the truth. The 2476 is lying against being a false witness, especially under oath. So any lying in court, all those little court cases that we see on TV where people lie, that is wrong. Right? Especially if anybody innocent or was going to be condemned, or anybody that was guilty was set free because of your lying, right? And the gravity is based even on the sin of the person that you might be sinning against, lying against. All right? And you have to have absolute respect for other people's reputation. That's clear. So rash judgments, as under thou shalt not bear false witness, Without sufficient foundation, you never run to rash judgment. You're assuming something is true. You always say, people are always quick. We, in a culture, the news media train us on this, to assume the wrong right away. Something's evil here. Something's bad. We got to fish it out. The government's that way. The media's that way. They're all about trying to find something that's bad. And they assume that it's bad. As Catholics, we should always assume the best until we know otherwise. Right? Detraction is another sin that hardly anybody ever, since I didn't even know it was until I read the Catechism, was that is disclosing a fault. Because our argument was, look, I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't lie. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't need to say it either. Detraction is saying something about another person that you had no reason to say in the first place. That person has no reason to know about an affair that she or he had. There's no reason to. Even if it's absolutely true. They say it's not gossip, it's true. Everybody knows it. You know what? That without valid reason, you disclose another person's fault. She's this way. We say that sometimes. You clean all that up under this commandment. And then calumny is lying intentionally to harm the reputation of others, which is really another thing, too, that we do oftentimes. Detraction, and these destroy reputations. This is 2479. And then everyone has a right to the honor of his or her name, right? And the reputation and the respect for the name. And I think that as under this commandment, we'll be held accountable when we ruin other people's reputation. Okay? The other thing, which is 2480, which is also interesting. So it doesn't just talk about saying bad things. Even using flattery, right? Or excessive admiration or praise. That's not true. Right? Or complacency, where we have this sense of willingness to please another, to be agreeable, to say kind things, on purpose, just to say, oh, you're such a great person, even though you're trying to flatter the person, want to be on their good side, and you're doing it. Someone's always nice. Oh, aren't you beautiful? That's something, people say. But when you do it specifically to flatter someone, to get someone, to encourage someone to act in a certain way, or in a bad way as well, it says in 2480. It can be grave fault if it makes one an accomplice to this, like, oh, you're so good. Why don't you help me? Oh, you like me. Where you because you're such a good person at this, you can help me take this or whatever. You're a good person. Maybe you're so smart. You could help me cheat. Just help me because you're so smart. So even being one's at service of friendship, it does not justify duplicitous speech, because they're such a good friend. So it's a venial sin when it only seeks to be agreeable. That's not what you really believe, but you're just trying to be in their favor, or avoid evil, or to get the advantage of someone. So you both. What I like is 2481 under this one. Boasting and bragging is an offense against truth. So if you're going to boast or brag about yourself, which is excessive, bragging. So, and then in 2482, lying is speaking falsehood, obviously, with the intention to deceive. And it makes the connection. Who is the father of all deception? The devil, evil, right? So the father we call him the prince of lies, the evil one. So therefore we see. So lying is real, obviously, offense against the truth. Now, 2484. Oops, I don't have it there. But lying, 2484. I didn't put it up, I guess. Put 2487 up. The gravity of the lie is measured against the nature of the truth it deforms. So that's why it's like, do you like my necklace? Well, it's nothing. It doesn't do anything for me, but yeah, sure, it's fine. It's cute. I like it, even though I don't, right? But it doesn't really matter, right? So the truth it deforms. The circumstances, the intention of the one who lies, the harm suffered by its victims. So look, if you say, does this look good? And it looks awful. It looks really bad, but you don't want to say anything, right? So you say, look, it looks fine. but the person suffers humiliation after. Just kidding. These are bigger lies than that. I'm just trying to exaggerate for the little white lies we tell ourselves. If the lie in itself is constituted a venial sin, it becomes mortal when it does grave injury. Right? So the idea is obviously, but the reason why I want to bring that up is that the church recognizes there's a very difference between lying where someone is truly hurt and lying where there's really no consequences. It doesn't mean that lying is okay, but it does mean that it is based on the gravity of the lie. The church recognizes that. And I remember someone saying, a lie is a lie is a lie. And I'm like, the church doesn't say that. We do believe the fact that there are some sins that are deadly, right? They're capital sins. They're evil. They are deadly sins, we call them. They're mortal sins. And then there are some sins that are venial. They don't break your relationship with God. There is a gradation of sin, but that it does harm us in some way. It shows the brokenness of the world, right, that we have this.
So is a white lie a sin?
A white lie is still a sin. It's offense against the truth. But see,
Even though you might be hurting someone.
but the question though is like, there is the truth and then there is opinion. Okay? So it's something like, do you like this? Well, you should say the truth. Like, I've learned to say, do you want me to say the truth? Do you want to know what I really think, or what do you want me to say? You know, because the people are that, we get that way. But there's something very different about something that truly is the truth, that someone lies against, and someone that says, do you like this? And yeah, it's all right. No, I like it. It's fine. But there are some white lies. Now, the big thing that comes in, and I think I mentioned this very quickly, is that, and we're going to talk about this, is that, let's say it's World War II, the Gestapo knocks on my door, I've got some Jews in the attic, and I'm saving their life, and they say, do you have any Jews here? And they said, nope, we don't have any. And I've just lied to that person, right? However, the question is that acceptable? Because we know the consequences of my telling them that would be that these people would be hauled away, right? And that's where I think, where the church talks about the idea, and I think it's in there. I think it's 87. Let me read this. Every offense committed against justice and truth entails the duty of reparation. Oh, this is the reparation. It's the next one. All right. So I'll get to that one. This one I want to make sure I get. When it's impossible publicly, so when you lie, a reparation against the truth, you have to make reparation for that. The truth has to come out, even if its author has been forgiven. So even though it's like, oh, I've forgiven my sins, you need to make up for this, especially if that lie was significant. But when it's impossible to publicly make reparation for the wrong. So when someone says to me, I lied, or I stole, you can do that. I say, well, you have to give it back, or you have to tell the truth. I lied who really got into that accident. I lied so that I didn't have to. So you have to fix this. Well, there are some things you can't fix, right? That it's beyond what can be fixed publicly. But it must be made secretly. So I'll often tell it's easier for stealing. If someone says, I stole, $50 from work. If you go back and you say, look, I stole this, you'll lose your job. The church recognizes that. I can't do that publicly because I could be arrested. I mean, my life would be over. So I say, well, you can't benefit from that $50, so give it away to charity. So you don't gain anything. And that's where it says, it must be done secretly. Could you sneak it back in? That kind of thing. If you can't do that, if someone who has suffered harm cannot directly be compensated, it must be given moral satisfaction in the name of charity. Meaning that it's not mine to own, so I give it away. Right? The duty of reparation also concerns offense against another person's reputation. You hurt someone's reputation, you have the obligation to go back and fix that reputation. Right? You destroyed the reputation. In reparation, moral, sometimes material, must be evaluated in terms of the extent of the damage inflicted. Okay, so if I ruin someone's reputation and a divorce happens, that's very different than if I ruined a reputation, because I'm a sixth grader and I really, I have no sense of what's appropriate, or especially if I'm a girl, because they seem to chat like that about every other. They'll kill each other behind. It's amazing. I was teaching, when I was in high school doing youth ministry, whew, you guys will say some nasty things about each other. You know, it's amazing. You rip each other down, no question. But the idea, but the harm is usually, it can get pretty serious for some of them because they have, damage forever for life. But the idea is that you need to fix this reparation. So when you come in and you can tell, well, I'll just confess it. I said, well, you got to go fix that. What do you mean? How are you going to fix this? And especially if it's really, really bad, like which some people can do in their lying. But the right to communicate the truth, this is the line I want. The right to communicate the truth is not unconditional. I have the word meaning it's conditional. Just because you know the truth doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be communicated. You don't have to say it just because. That's why when you watch Jerry Springer, you see what I watch? Watch Jerry Springer. They kind of talk that, well, they're talking about all the truth, but it's like, nobody needs to know that. You don't need to tell us that stuff that you're doing. So everyone must conform his life to the gospel precept of fraternal love. This requires us, in a concrete situations, to judge whether or not it is appropriate to reveal the truth to someone who's asking for it. So if someone's asking you for the truth, like, do you have to use it? I would say, you don't have the right to know that. That's not appropriate for you to know. So then that mitigates this, because I believe the truth, but I don't think you have the right, because you are an evil person who's going to kill them. And I'm not going to give you the right to know the truth. Right? So that's one of the things that's oftentimes it's like, well, it's true. Well, you don't necessarily need to know that truth. And I think that really changes us as how we communicate with one another. Because I grew up, and maybe you did too, that if it's true, then you can say it. Because if it's false, obviously no one should say false. But some people have private lives. They've changed their life, right? It was probably in the past. They've probably experienced some abuse or did some abuse, and it's in the past. They've changed it. It's been 30 years. Nobody has a right to bring that all back up, even no matter how true it is. Because it was like, nobody has a right to know that. And if you find that out, you don't necessarily have to say it to anybody. But it's hard because sometimes it's really juicy. You want to tell somebody, right? But everybody has a right to their reputation. So charity and respect for truth should dictate the response to every request of information and communication. So you ask me a question, charity comes first for any kind of communication I have. And that's why when you're dealing with the presence of evil, I've got two evils here that can happen. I've got a lie, plus I got the death, I got the hauling away of people, innocent people, just because, they're not liked. I have to deal with the lesser of two evils because I'm going to be faced with these two evils. And I know that they don't have the right to know that. They think they have the right to know that, but I think God would say otherwise, right? Because, and then I have to gauge the request for information. The good and safety of others, the respect for privacy, and the comfort and the pain that we do to each other. All right? And then professional secrets, for example, those in political office. All right? And then professional secrets, for example, those in political office holders, soldiers, physicians, lawyers, or confidential information given under the seal of secrecy must be kept. Save the exception of cases where keeping the secret is bound to cause very grave harm to one who confided it, or to the one who received it, or to the third party. So unless that person is in danger, right? We know that. Other secrets that are told by lawyers, doctors, physicians, they should be kept. If you know a secret, you should keep it. It's not yours. You should not reveal it unless, of course, it's a harmful thing, like someone's going to commit suicide, someone's going to kill someone. Those you should be. But You found out someone's having an affair, you keep it to yourself. You cannot tell your husband.
Really?
No.
But we were as one.
Where grave harm can be avoided by divulging the truth, even if not confided under the secret seal. Private information, prejudicial to another is not to be divulged without grave or proportionate reason. Part of that is just how one lives one's life in terms of the respect for the truth and to not bear false witness, but also when do you speak and stand up for the truth, and when does the one truth need to be said? The proper exercise of this right demands the content of communication to be true, within the limits set by justice and charity, true and complete. This is right here very important. The exercise of the right demands that content of the communication to be true and complete. Okay, further, it should be communicated honestly and properly. This means that the gathering and the publication of news, the moral law, and legitimate rights and dignity of man should be upheld. This is what kills me sometimes, where that's the place where you didn't say the truth, but you didn't lie, right? And I still always remember, remember Davy and Goliath? Hello, Davy. Remember that talking dog, right? Yes. By the Lutheran Church on the morning on Sunday mornings, Davy. I still remember because Davy was going to the pastor there because they were Lutheran pastor, and he said to her, to the pastor, it was a man, said, "But I didn't lie." And then the pastor said, "But you didn't tell the truth." And I think that's the difference, because sometimes technically he didn't lie, but we have people who always telling the truth. And I think what happened was he didn't lie, but because it's about communication. And we all know, I know in my mind, when I say just enough that's true, so that I've communicated the truth, but not completely, honestly, and properly. Right? And I think that to me, the news is like this all the time. Because they communicate just enough to sway you, but you know that that's not the whole truth. It's enough for the narrative. And I think one of the things that's really tough for us today, and I don't believe anything anymore in the news. I don't. Right up front, I don't know why anybody would. I don't know. I watch the news every day, by the way. I watch Channel 6, primarily, NBC Nightly News, the next day on YouTube, so I don't have all the commercials, right? So I watch it in double time. So a 20-minute show takes 10 minutes to watch. And the reason is because I need to know what the conversation is. I want to know what people are talking about. But I know that as soon as one guy or girl, one person gets up there, that I'm only getting what that person wants me to know. And that drives me crazy, whether I'm watching Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. I know, and the whole news world is really entertainment now, or it's all persuasion. It's not communicating to me the truth, because you know that all you have to do is listen to a certain person, and you know exactly what they're going to say. You know where they're going to stand. You know what part they're going to. And anytime they want to bring kind of people in, it's like, well, how do you get a place where you can look at the situation and be able to figure out what's good or what's bad in this? And what happens in my world today, whenever we have a conversation, and I know who I'm talking to, if we want to try to find the truth here, everybody's so emotional that if I say something or if I appear something, then it's like, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on Trump, or if it's on Kamala, whatever, I know that I will not be able to have a conversation beyond those words, because it's all gonna come about with the talking points. And I want to say, well, let's take a look. What can we do? So anyway, I don't know. Did you have a question?
Lying, and then you're not telling the truth, but how does that factor in when it's not really their right to know? So then you have to kind of say, well, I don't really know, which is a lie, right. Or you have to tell the truth, which isn't theirs to know. So where does that fall into it?
You know, it's tough. I know, because we deal with because we're nice people. But we often, I've had to say sometimes, it's not right for me to say it. It's not right for me, or I don't have the right to talk about that. And now people get offended all the time, you know, like, oh, really, you don't have a right to know. You know, but that's because we all feel like truth, anything should be and could be said. And I think sometimes it's like, you know, I really prefer not to talk about this.
That factor into when you're at work and people above you. Like I've been in one job for 21 years, and I'm the only one in our circles that know lots of things.
About
and
what?
Particulars about dynamics in a family. I work with children with special needs, so sometimes the history is indicative of how the future will play out with particular personalities of parents. And
All right,
then
but I'm not quite sure what if you're talking about something where the knowledge that you're gaining is part of the job that you have, right?
Yeah, like
that
experience
the people
of
need to know who are in charge. That's different.
Right.
Who needs to know this?
Well, it's usually my new supervisor because I've had like 7 in 21 years. So I'm always the one that knows stuff, and they always come and try to find out stuff from me. And I
But
feel
do they
like,
have the right? Should they know it?
well,
You have
me,
to ask.
that's the hard part, because sometimes yes, and sometimes I feel like when I'm answering their questions, it goes too far, and it's like, well, okay, and then I try to cut it short, and they're like, "What are you not saying?" And they press you, and it's hard to. And I go, I really want to.
Well, if you're gonna act like you have to say something, you want to say more, and then but you know, I mean, I think it's a judgment call for all of us. But the question you have to ask: does this person need to know what I'm telling them? And if it's your boss and it has to do with work, there's a lot more give than if it's the person you came home and you saw at the grocery store. Obviously, right? So. I mean, I think you gotta figure out. It takes some reason, use your brain, reason to judge whether this person. And you know, if you're in a situation of work, I mean, I know that if I'm dealing with a priest, let's say, I talk to another priest. That priest doesn't need to know, but if I'm talking to the bishop, he needs to know. So it's a different kind of situation, and you have to use their judgment, use prudence, fortitude, courage, right, and temperance. In that, the cardinal virtues that you foster. Well, the moral life is not a cakewalk. I mean, why do you think there's so much sin around? Right? I mean, if it was a cakewalk, we'd all be perfect. But it is true. It is true. All right? And then the last one, yes.
Wouldn't you say that you have to do a conversational dance?
Makes them feel like they're dancing with you. Unless you put up a wall and you say, look, that is really not a place I want to go to talk about. If they press you, then part of it is like, how far do you want to stand up for the truth? If you, right, that's your decision to make. You'll know when it's like, look, I can't talk about that. It's not right. It's not right to speak this way. You know? And it makes it very clear, but sometimes we don't want to be that clear, right? It's like, look, I can't.
I've been very blunt and very clear.
There you go.
With
Good.
multiple people. And you know what? If they don't want to talk to me anymore, I have to say I've learned through you and somebody else that's their choice. It's no loss to me because of the fact that then they were not being honest with themselves at all.
That's right. All right. I mean, these are judgment calls, but take a look at 2492. This is like screwed up in our world. You must have concern for a person's private life. All right? There should be a fair balance between the requirements of the common good and the respect of individual rights. Interference by the media, in the private lives of persons engaged in political or public life is to be condemned when it infringes on their own privacy and freedom. And our world, right, the paparazzi and all of that stuff, but we love it, the gossip rags and all that stuff of reading and, and getting involved in the Kardashians or whoever they are. The Kardashians, I think, is actually that's not the right word. No, that's on Star Trek, right? Kardashians? No. Oh, Kardashians. The Star Trek is the Kardashians and the Kardashians. No, that's not Kardashians. I'm not saying it right. Well, you must know. Kardashians? Kardashians. The Kardashians. See, it shows you. I'm just glad I don't even know them, right? I just know that I see them coming up all the time, right? So but they love the public. That's what they get all their money from. People but then, and all of a sudden they intrude on their private life, which drives me crazy. And they're like, hey, I have a private life. And they all get mad. And I'm like, look, that's what's giving you all the money you have. You want a private life? Then be like one of us where nobody cares what we do, right? I don't have anybody looking at what I do. And so the proper exercise of this right demands that content of the communication be true. I mean, the media, really, all lies, right? It's got to be true, right? So there should be genuine right to communication and free circulation. Everybody should have the right to communicate too, for the good, right? But with respect for others. And then 2497, journalists have the obligation to serve the truth, not their opinion. Read these newspaper articles, and I'm like, you choose words that are very divisive and are very persuasive rather than try to communicate what's really true. You're already telling me what you believe, right? And the last part I just want to leave with is truth, and it says just in truth and beauty, but truth is beauty itself. Truth is beautiful. When you live in the truth, that's close to God. God is truth. God is beauty. Beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. All right, man expresses the truth in relationship with God, and I think we say sacred art is true and beautiful when it captures the truth, something beautiful, and we should promote sacred art. So ninth, yeah. And someone in back was talking about
whether or not their supervisor has a right to know things, or even the CEO.
Supervisor has the right to know things of the CEO.
Or they come and say, well, how's so-and-so doing? And it's really not their business. It's not, they don't have a right to that.
They don't have a right to that.
Yeah. And I can see where that would happen over and over again, because it's happened. And then they take you out of your position, and you're not in it anymore. But at least you stood up for truth.
Right.
But even the CEO.
Of course, because listen, you pay the consequences for trying to keep this. And that's what it's also trying to say. If you want to maintain what's true, and you're going to be honest and respect people's reputation, and that does not afford you the benefits of promotions, because then you go back to the other section that says increase flattery or boasting or telling or revealing things to gain other people's favor is just as wrong. So if you say, well, I'm going to tell them the truth because then we learned this in 5th grade, where if I tell one of my friends something, now we got something against that one, right? That's all part of the deceptive evil.
And in mental health, especially.
In mental health, especially.
If someone's been there for 10 years and receiving treatment, they're not necessarily the same person.
Right, yeah.
And so they don't, if they really want to read that and they have a right to read it, they can do it, but you don't have to say it.
Right. So, what was that? All right. So the 9th commandment is you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Under this one, by the way, if you have the Protestant section and they have different numbering. They have number 9 is you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's good. That was set by Augustine way back. However, if you take another group of them, there will be the last one, which will be 10. and it'll be thou shalt not covet, and it covers both of them because they have the one that not graven images, so they have 4 in the front. My point in the numbering is it doesn't really matter. Even the church recognizes that. And it says that some have this together, they belong together, others don't. The point is it's all the same truth. It doesn't matter what number, how you number them, how historically they have been numbered. Because it's all the commandments. All right, but we as Catholics separate because we follow Augustine that separated covet thy neighbor's goods, wife, and thy neighbor's goods. Because under the neighbor's wife is the whole teaching on lust, right? That when you covet and you want someone else, all right? So the church in this section starts with the fact that the word that's very Catholic is concupiscence, all right? That's 25:15. All right? 25:15, concupiscence, we believe, that means it's an intense human desire. But in our Catholic theology, concupiscence is a key word you learn in philosophy and theology, Catholic theology. Because concupiscence in Catholic theology means the appetite, the desire, or that is often contrary to reason because our appetites have been through sin have been harmed. Because he's got food, has harmed. So St. Paul would talk about how the flesh is rebellious, right? Flesh against the spirit. That we feel in concupiscence, we feel a tug of war between the body and the spirit. That's a human experience from a long time ago. That comes, we say, from the disobedience of the first sin, where we created a situation where our desires ruled bigger and larger in us than our reason. And so concupiscence is going to be that disordered tendency within the human being to do things that were unreasonable and irrational. But because we allow our passions to get out of control. So it comes from the disobedience and the moral faculties that we say that was damaged and it inclines us. So even something, oftentimes it's related to sex, but it's often just, when you can get so angry that you did something that was really unreasonable. And you probably said something that was really unreasonable. That's part of the disordered tendency within the human being. We all have that experience. Because we know that it's not right. There are some things like, and when you see someone who's out of control, right? And they're doing things that are harming. I mean, I always say because of concupiscence, kings have lost entire fortunes in countries because they were out of control, right? And whether it was their desire for power, for money, but oftentimes too for, what they would do for sex or and they were no longer reasonable. They couldn't think correctly. That the reason no longer mastered their actions, right? But their passions did. And that's a reality we all have to deal with. So in 25:16, it says, man is a body and spirit. And there's already a built-in tension between the flesh and the spirit, right? And we say that we daily struggle in a spiritual battle because of that. We all do. It's a part of the human being. But it's not a hatred of the body, because it's not the body that's bad. That's why I would no, not at all the hatred of the body. But because the body is good. But we know that we don't often submit our body to reason. Does that make sense? That's the basic thing, because that's where the sin of coveting, when I desire something, desire it so much that I do unreasonable things to get it, and even hurt people, or even evil to get what I want. Okay? I got this picture for body and spirit. We're body and soul, spirit and material world. And so we have these desires, right, that sometimes seem out of whack. And they cause us to do terrible things that hurt people. Okay? So, under this one, because of that human experience, that we would hurt the people we love, how could we do that? How could we possibly do that? Well, that's because we are called for a purification of the heart in this commandment. Purification of the heart, purity of heart, means that it's the heart, we believe, is where all sin starts. It starts from within. So there's a call to purity from within us, right? And to stay away from loving things that destroy us in the end, destroy our lives, like processed food. Just kidding. That's where I'm going. No, other things.
You're on that carnivore diet, so I'm not surprised
That's
you
right.
said that.
I'm on the carnivore diet. It's a processed food, but we love it. We love it, and it's absolutely not good for us, right? We know that, but we're talking about even more serious things. That you would do things that would destroy your marriage and can't seem to control yourself over it, right? Why would you choose those things? To stay away from these things. So a pure heart means that one is attuned, and this is where 25:18 comes in. 25:18. The pure heart means that one is attuned to the intellect and the will, right? To the demands of God's holiness and charity and chastity and truth and orthodoxy of faith, it says. Right? So you got to connect. The idea is we've got to purify ourselves. Not just in sexual sins, but in all things. We purify and cleanse ourselves of these things that destroy us. So, but the idea of the purity of heart, body, and faith. So then it starts talking about purity. In baptism, baptism forgives all our sins. We're all been baptized and opens us to the life of grace. But there's still the struggle against concupiscence of this disordered tendency, right? And these disordered desires, it doesn't mean it changes our desires, right? So with God's grace, we believe we got to begin to address these, right? By God's grace, the virtue of chastity, right? Where we love things with upright and undivided heart. So even all married people called to chastity, that you love correctly, the things that should be loved, right? And the purity of intention, so that when in seeking things, this is in 25:20. So it's not, there you go. All right, so the idea is that you'd have purity in intention, which consists of seeking the true end of man, the end of the person. We never ever treated, no matter how much, never treat anybody as a subject, but always as an object. Always as an object, but always as a subject. Never as an object. We would never use anybody, ever be able to should use anybody for our own gratification. All right? So, and the purity of visions, whether internal, so discipline, we discipline ourselves in our imagination, by refusing to comply with impure thoughts and inclinations to turn aside from the path of God's commandments, not just in sex, but on all of them, lying, cheating, stealing. We got to purify ourselves of that. And then also the battle for purity of the human being, right? But this is where it gets tough, because it moves toward pretty much, because it's wife, it's going to be about sexuality and modesty. Modesty is something we don't care for today, right? We believe purity requires modesty. Modesty protects the intimate center of the human being. We got to tell, especially girls, but now guys, modesty, to protect the intimate center of the human being. It guides how one looks at others and behaves toward them. It respects the dignity of the human person. So we don't, the idea of modesty protects the person and their love, right? Modesty is decency. This is 25:21, 25:22. Inspires one's choice of clothing, right? It's discreet, that you dress in such a way that the minute you think that, I'm going to dress in a way, it's amazing how I say we're schizophrenic in this culture for many different ways, but we believe that you can dress any way you want, and if anybody responds to the way you want them to respond to because you're dressed that way, they're in trouble, right? But that's the reason why you dress that way. I mean, it's crazy, I think, for me anyway. And in 25:23, modesty of feelings against voyeurism in advertisement, in the media, in the movies, right? That go far, that take things that are supposed to be intimate, right? And instead it has exhibitionism, of things that belong to the core and the sacredness of the human being and relationships. So you could see that. And we are so desensitized to this that we don't even care anymore. It doesn't bother us. We defend it. And that's why it doesn't bother me. But in our true, pure faith, but you wouldn't watch any movies. You couldn't watch a commercial, right? Especially just for suntan lotion, right? It's all over, right? But you can imagine. And the problem is that if you say anything, they throw you all the way over to the prudish side. And I'm saying, well, it doesn't mean you can't be beautiful, but when beauty changes and it becomes more, sexual, I guess you'd say, rather than just plain beautiful, and whether you are trying to appeal to different senses, then that's a beautiful thing, and so this section, he said, this is sins against the commandment, and it's all over the place in our world. Modesty takes different forms in different cultures, so it does recognize that for some cultures it's not an issue, for others, but never lends to treat people as subjects. I mean, it never lends to treat people as objects. Always as a subject. It lends to, and the point being is that any time you've objectified a person, or that you've done something because you want to be objectified almost as a person, even though you say, oh, that would be not me. No. However, I still know that this should kind of give a rise to people, make them look second at me, and then be claimed. So 25:25, there's a need to be a purification of social climate. Media should show respect for the human being, right? Rather than go to the cheapest. One of the things I used to always say is about comedians, just remember this. And I remember that, I don't know why, I think my family, we used to say that in my family, but the easiest way for a comedian to have the house broken down is to swear. They swear, number one, everybody laughs. Number two, if it's a sexual joke, almost everybody laughs. Okay? Because that's the way to get it. It is really hard to be funny and clean. It's really hard. It's usually, and I'm not just talking about even just sexual jokes, but if you're not going to demean a person or make fun of, where the truth is it's hard. And one of the things in 25:26, moral permissiveness. One of the things in 25:26, moral permissiveness of doing what you want rests on the erroneous conception of human freedom. What they mean by that is that, look, the idea is I should be free to do what I want. And I'm like, I know, but you should be free, but you should be free to do the good, the holy, the pure, the right. Now, we think, and that's what we say is that it's an abuse of the use of freedom. All right? Purity of heart brings freedom. Okay, so there's a need for purification in social climate of the media. So purity of heart brings freedom from eroticism, entertainment that's voyeuristic. When people live in that world, and you could tell, you live in that world, you become addicted to that world, right? That's why it says freedom, purity. When you pure your heart, you are free, finally, from whether it's pornography, whether it's greed, whether it's that you become addicted to these things. You're no longer free. You need those things in order to feel happy or feel good. And they say, work on purity, you'll be free from all of that. So Christ continually renews the life and culture of a fallen man. So recognizing that all of this is grace, it's a part of the goal to move toward purity. That's the lifelong struggle. The Catechism already recognizes it's a battle because of concupiscence, but nonetheless, that doesn't mean we give it up. We continue the battle because the price is slavery to these things and not the freedom to live in it. That's the gift. So then the 10th commandment to modesty, 10th commandment is you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. And from there, this starts with 25:35. Look, all desires that we have are not bad. Because it even recognizes desire for food, desire for procreation, the desire, those are not bad. When you have a desire for food, you eat, right? When you desire for warmth, right? Because you're cold, guess what? These are things that drive us because we recognize them. Desire for a family, whatever it is, the desire to express love. These are all fine things. But, and there's the big but they can exceed the limits of reason and lead to covet unjustly what is not ours, or doesn't belong to us, or belongs to someone else, or is owed to someone else, but you want it. Especially when you have relationships of husbands and wives, like it's not yours to have. Right? So 25:36 says that the 10th commandment forbids greed and amassing all kinds of goods and stuff of this world for your own benefit without any limit. We do believe that there's a limit. So passion for riches and power is under this commandment. Forbids the desire to commit injustice to get it. The scripture passage always has that little passage. I think he says it in the Bible. I didn't write it down. But in the Bible where, one of the kings wants the one land that poor little guy has, right? Because he wants it, and he says, no, I don't want to give it to you. So he ends up having him killed so that he can take the land, And it's like, look, but you have all this, but I want that. That's what I want. Well, you can have anything you want. I don't want that. I want that, right? But that's not yours to have, but I want it, right? And that's the desire. So that's a sin under this commandment of coveting. Okay, that's not a violation to desire to have things, that belong to another. That's not where it is. Provided that it is done by a just mean, like someone has something, you buy it. It's just, it's yours. You can have it. Nothing wrong with that, as long as it's just in that it is due you and you can have it. But and this is where so that's 37, and it says 25:38. But it forbids envy, which leads to a crime or to a sin, which means that you would do something to get it. And envy is a capital sin. That's what envy is, all right? Envy is wanting to where it leads. Sadness in the sight of another's good. I see someone who has a beautiful voice and I envy it because I want to sing it. I want to sing like that. So I hate the person because he sings so good, so well. He sings well, right? He's a good singer and I hate him because he's good. And that happens all the time in our baby, right? Sometimes it's like, why do you don't like the person? Why not? Why don't you like that person? Because I don't like what he has, or he has what I want, or how can he be have everything, And how does he have such a nice life and I don't? I hate him, that kind of thing. All right, to have them. So Augustine saw envy as a diabolical sin. From envy come born hatred, detraction, calumny, slander, right? Joy caused by misfortune of your neighbor. It's like, good, he deserved it. I hope he gets sued for $1 billion and he loses all his money, Like, obviously that's a sin. We all, that. And I can't stand him because he's so successful, And displeasure caused by his prosperity. And then 25:40, there's a sadness, it says, that comes from this because it comes from your pride. It's envy and envy. You watch someone who can't be happy because they're only concerned about what everybody else has. It's like, how could you not be happy with what you have? And if you could just be okay with what you have, your life would be so different than what God has for you. But it's like, no, I want more. I want that which I cannot have. And this plays out in the world all the time. They say, and certainly in sexual relationships, you covet what you can't have, right? You envy, that's what you want, even though what you have is good. But as soon as someone plays hard to get in our world, all of a sudden that's what I want, because then I can get it. All right? So the desire for the Spirit, grace turns one away from this kind of greed and envy. The law could not justify man because of the instrument of lust, because we have this idea. And that's 25, 20, 41, and 42. And then the idea for us as Catholics and what Jesus has to say is that poverty that we're called to, poverty of heart, where Jesus wants us to prefer him to everyone and everything. Right? That's what God wants. So renouncing all of this for the gospel. So the big phrase, the big word, spiritual word is detachment, right? That we are detached from the things of this world. What we mean, not that we don't care about them, but they are not the source of our joy and our happiness and our love for this world, right? That's detachment. You'll see that in any spiritual book you have. Our world is constantly attached to things, and we're sad when we lose them. And the goal in the spiritual life is to detach from riches, from the obligations, from, like the rich young man in today's reading, if you went to Mass, right? It was the rich young man who went away sad because he had many things. Like, what do I need? And he's like, follow the commandments. So I've done that. What else do I need? He said, go sell your stuff and give it to the poor. And he went away sad because he had too much. He had much. He couldn't part with it, right? And by the way, what we're doing at night is we're watching The Chosen, Father Michael and I, so we were talking about the scene last night because we were just finished the first season. So we would watch 2 a day. There's only 8 per season. How many of you have watched it? So okay. And what's nice about it is that it's, for one thing, it's not biblically accurate, and many things. It's kind of like when we watch historical fiction, because you need to put a story around this. And as long as you recognize that, okay, this thing probably didn't necessarily happen. But what happens is Nicodemus is the high priest, right? And he's in what this commandment is trying to talk about in terms of especially in poverty of heart, is to be willing to be free from all of that. And how when we have things, how they own us. And then when so much sometimes that we can't respond to God when he's right in our midst, because I can't do that. I'm tied to all of this. And I'm tied to myself and my reputation and my thing. I can't respond to God. And that's kind of what you see in that scene. But that's where this 25:44, where Catholics are directed to our directions of direct our affections rightly and not to riches, not to the things, not to be attached to the things of this world. That's why Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Not necessarily that we're all poor. That's not the idea. God doesn't want everybody to be poor. Poor will always be with us. But this idea to be free from it. That's ultimately what religious life was all about too, is that you would be free from these things so that it would free you up to do God's will, to do what God's asked of you. All right? So the Lord grieves at that rich man, you could see, and sort of Nicodemus. Now, that's not biblical, by the way, because I don't remember seeing that. That scene doesn't exist there in the Bible. But it's a scene, I think, that does respond to the human experience. So the freedom from attachments is 25:48. Attachments for the good of this world. Freedom for the attachments of the goods of this world in order to do God's will. And it's not saying all these things are bad. It's not bad to have a home and to have a place to raise your family, right? That's not bad. It's just that when they start ruling you and that owns you, and when there's a difference. To be free from these attachments, right? So we believe that and this is what Lent is all about. We mortify our cravings, right? And our desires for pleasure and power so that we are free to do the things God asks us to do. And that's why we are people who are the whole commandments, and ends on this at 25:50. On the way to perfection, we talk about we're called to perfection. Now, we're not talking about perfect. That because no, that's not in this side. But we're called to move toward wholeness, the way God had designed all of this to be, the way we should live our lives, the way God wanted the world to be before we turned to. It talks about in terms of, when you have to prune the bush, in order for it to grow, right? Or something has to die in order for new life to come, that kind of thing. Well, in our lives, we got to let go of these things in order for new life to come. Sometimes we have to let go of our own selfishness in order for a love between the husband and a wife to shine, to grow. You have to let that part die. That's the purification part of it, of our own greed. Then illuminative means that all of a sudden now you see things differently, right? It's like I can see something. Once you could purify that, you could see. Once an alcoholic, deals with the alcoholism, now he's free. He sees the world differently. And then there's the unitive. Once you do that, then the unitive is the next step, means becoming one with God and each other and with ourselves. But that division can only be healed first by purifying. And purifying is a terrible experience. It's Lent. That's what Lent is, that purification. It is, because, if you want to sacrifice, nobody likes to do that. But, the only way to the resurrection is the cross. You don't have a resurrection if you don't have a cross. You got to die in order to rise, right? So this is the idea in the spiritual life. So if you want to see God, purification has to happen, right? And once purification happens, then all of a sudden, now I see. But when you are in the depths of sin, you don't see correctly. That's the only reason why you could ever justify, a husband has an affair. I'm not going to blame just the guy, right? Has an affair. Destroys his family. Destroys the family that he's had in the family, the first he had in the family. And yet can still justify it as something that was a good thing. And you hear it all the time. And I'm like, that's because you're in the grips of it. You're in the grips of this and you're not seeing things correctly. How could you think that you could hurt that family, could hurt so many people, is the right thing to do in the name of you getting what you want? And forever destroyed these. Sometimes I've watched families, these kids will never grow up well again, right? Because will never recover from this. This will be burned into their being. And it's all because you wanted what you wanted. So that's why purification, you don't see it correctly. Because I remember my spiritual director telling me, and I say it a million times, because I say it to myself a million times, the ability for self-deception is limitless. You can deceive yourself and justify yourself into anything. And our culture is doing that for sure. Because there is no way, absolutely no way, you could tell me the truth about the where we are right now in terms of the whole, gender identity. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it at all, because the truth is so clear. It's science. It's true. And yet they can cut to and hurting all kinds of people, and I don't think in the name of helping them. And people can fight with me over that, but I think there are better ways to help people come to see and love who they are and who God made them to be. Right? Just love who you are. You don't have to be anybody else than who God made you to be. But that's from my perspective. I think that sounds holistic. It sounds true. It sounds way someone can come to see who they are and the beautiful life that this is. And if you don't think it's beautiful, then let's work on that. Let's not hurt you or change you, mutilate you. So that gives us to 2550, and we're done. We've done the 10 Commandments, right? And it's perfect timing because it's time for us to go into Lent, right? Does anybody have any last questions? What's interesting is we are coming to, the other thing that's coming to hard part our world, and it's happened in other cultures, is that what I just said could get me arrested. That's the amazing thing. Even if it's not very nice. The fact that now in other places now You can get arrested for this in other cultures, other countries, Western worlds now, maybe even north of us, where now they're not tolerating any kind of discussion like this. And I don't understand it. I mean, freedom of speech and opinion and ideas and free-flowing ideas are not really where we're headed. So, any last things? Nothing? Nothing from the All right, how about if we do a glory be, and then we can answer any kind of questions. Jenny, you got a question? But
Yeah, it was more so just kind of like an observation. It was really interesting. I don't know why he keeps appearing on my phone, but St. Thomas More, I guess his picture just keeps appearing on my phone. And so anyway, like on my Instagram feed and stuff. And what's interesting is when you were talking about standing up for the truth, I immediately thought of like him and his story, how even though him and Henry VIII were like really good friends with each other, he wouldn't advocate for him divorcing his wife and splitting from the church.
that's right. But remember too, I think when you watch A Man for All Seasons, if you all watch that movie, that's Thomas More, St. Thomas More. The big thing is that he did not go against the king, but he did not support the king. And he says, you'll never find me going against you, king, because I respect you. But I'm not going to sign that says it's good, but I'm not going to say you're bad. I'm not going to say it's bad. In other words, I am not responding, but the requirement was for him to sign it, because everybody had to sign it, that they support it. And he's like, I'm not going to go against my faith in supporting it, but you've never heard me say anything against you either. So he becomes a real model of how do you deal with something you don't agree with, where you're not going to support, but yet you are not going to publicly find any statement where I condemn you for it as well, But the fact is that the requirement was that he needed to sign it, and so it gives us a good.
Remain true to God.
Right.
Jesus Christ, our Savior.
Well, still not defaming the king. He didn't defame the king, but see, the problem by him not signing it, everybody knew it. So they knew what he was standing against it, even though he did not say anything about it. He would say, you will never hear me say anything about it. But he was a public enough person, made a huge difference. All right, let's do a little glory be. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. All right, so you got all the doctrinal side to it. You got all the moral side to it. You know what the next two options are if we continue. The prayer side of it and the sacramental side of it. All right, great. Good night, guys. Have a great Lent. Join a small faith sharing group.
Got it today.
You did?
Yeah.
How was it?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, it was very good.
You're ready for the weekend. So if you don't have a small faith, I was thinking that maybe we could all be a small faith sharing group too. Yeah, can you imagine? I talk all the time. Good night, guys.